Good morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Sunday, the 15th day of December, 2024. And like we do here every day, we bring you the latest stories that have something to do with how the world is getting set up, just as the Bible predicts, for the events that are going to take place in our world, culminating in the second coming of Jesus Christ. But many events will indeed precede it, according to Scripture. And as we see here every day, stage is getting set. All right, in the headlines today, some really interesting ones. Israel has no more excuses for entering Syria. That comes from the rebel leader Julani while he gives his first major TV interview. This is recorded in the Jerusalem Post. Al-Julani also says he's aiming for a greater Syria. We read about this in Israel Hayom, and we'll talk about what all that means. Hezbollah leader admits the terror group has lost their weapons supply route. This is from the Israel National News, and this is not surprising with, Syria now in the hands of, not in the hands of Hezbollah or Iran or Assad or anybody like that. A story that I'm getting sick of doing, but we won't be doing it after another 6 weeks. Joe Biden and company are doing as much damage to the U.S. as they can before they leave. This is from the New York Post, and boy, ain't that the truth. And here's an illustration of that. Our next headline: Donald Trump slams the long-range missile strikes on Russia. This is from Tyler Durden and Zero Hedge. And finally, another Zero Hedge story: the UK government. Guess what they want to do? They want to ban communities from stopping wind and solar. Another Zero Hedge story. Basically, what they're saying: you have to be woke and do wind and solar. You try and ban it, we won't allow you to do it. And so we're going to tell you what you can and cannot do with respect to energy in the future. All right. Now, Christmas is 10 days out, and so we're going to do some videos on the subject of Christmas. Uh, Four topics so far I've got. Was Jesus born on December 25th? We'll talk about that. Why did God the Son, Jesus Christ, become a human being? The Incarnation. That's another video we'll do. Why did Jesus come at that particular time in history? We'll explain that. And did Jesus come to bring peace on earth? Now, these should remind us what this season is all about. Plus, when Christmas Day comes around and you have the Christmas dinner, almost every family has one blowhard, either male or female, that seems to know everything about the Bible, but probably never, they couldn't find the New Testament, probably if you handed them a Bible. But if they start pontificating on subjects like this, you might want to say, hey, there is another point of view on this, another way to look at it. And you can point them to what we've said, or you can memorize it yourself and tell them what the scripture says or what the evidence is. But anyway, we do this for you. So for Christmas time, remind us what season this is. This is most important. Like we said yesterday, of first importance, numero uno, according to Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, 3 and 4, is the gospel that Christ came, died for the sins of the world, rose again from the dead. And this is the message we preach. All right, now let's get to the stories today. Headline number one: Israel has no more excuses for entering Syria. This was from rebel leader Julani, not Rudy Giuliani. Giuliani is his name, Al-Julani. He says in his first major TV interview, Giuliani called for the end of all foreign intervention in Israel in the interest of restabilizing and rebuilding the country. Syrian leader and head of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, Ahmad Abu Mohammed al-Julani al-Shara, addressed Syria's future, focusing on international relations for the first time on a Saturday interview with opposition TV channel Syria.tv. Julani said Israel's excuses for entering Syria no longer exist. After the Iranians' departure, there are no more justification for any foreign intervention in Syria. The exhausted Syrian situation after years of war and conflicts does not allow for entering into any new conflicts. He said his priority was reconstruction and stability and not dragging Syria into conflicts that would lead to further destruction. Now, it's interesting that this terrorist leader, which nobody voted for, can come to a country like Syria and demand that its neighbor Israel should stay out of the country. Obviously, Israel is doing just the opposite, namely destroying the military assets of the former Assad regime. So when these people finally get it together, they will have no major assets militarily. Like we've said, they've already destroyed their Air Force, their Navy. They're working on destroying their chemical weapons. There's other assets that they have there that they're discovering, some hidden, that they are destroying. And so when this new group comes into power, remember there's a 3 month time they're putting a constitution together. There'll be nothing really that'll have any offense against Israel, any really problem for Israel to deal with. because any weapons that could be there are not there anymore, will be taken care of. So anyway, now there's a further reason why Israel must pay attention to this person. That's found in our next headline. Al-Julani aims for a greater Syria. This is from the Israel Hayom website. To an outside observer, the terrorist figurehead who once belonged to ISIS and Al-Qaeda might seem to have transformed. However, his aim is not merely the liberation of Syria alone, but of greater Syria, encompassing Lebanon, Jordan, and yes, Israel. So far, we'll go through all his names. Giuliani is playing his cards right. He calls for tolerance towards minorities in Syria, advocates utilizing the administrative infrastructure of the old regime to quickly restore normalcy, and gives interviews to both Syrian and international media to present himself and his organization, HTS, in a positive light. He has learned how to appeal to the West, giving it exactly what they want to hear. And there's a number of buffoons that are buying all this, like Anthony Blinken and others. In an interview with Syria TV, a channel operating out of Turkey, the rebel leader declared, "We must transition from a revolutionary mentality to a state-oriented mentality to govern Syria." Now, it's not surprising in the least that he wants to rule a greater Syria. Of course, that would cause Israel to cease to exist as a democratic Jewish state. And this is the goal of these terrorists, all of them, whether it be Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, or whoever it might be. Thus, there is every reason for Israel to thwart this in every possible way. And so that's interesting that at least he said this. And so that's the justification for Israel, as if they needed any of staying. Remember, they're staying in Syria over the winter up on top of the Golan Heights and Mount Hermon into Syrian territory to make sure no one comes across the border, do any bad things to the people in Israel. All right, now speaking of the borders, the Hezbollah leader, the new one, admits the terror group has lost its weapons supply route. This is from the Israel National News. Hezbollah General Secretary, for the time being, Naim Qassem, says his group was victorious, will continue on, but admits it lost its weapons supply route, which ran from Iran to Lebanon via Syria. The General Secretary spoke Saturday night for the first time since the fall of the Assad regime in Syria. The enemy wanted to eliminate the opposition which stands in its way of expanding into the entire area, he said. At the same time, he admitted that his terror group has lost its weapons supply route from Iran through Syria, but he said the opposition will continue regardless. According to Qassem, Israel did not succeed in breaking Hezbollah during the fight. The enemy understood that the horizon for fighting Hezbollah was blocked, so they reached an agreement, he explained. Hezbollah was victorious because the enemy did not achieve its central goal to eliminate Hezbollah and return the settlers home without an agreement. No, that's not what happened, pal. Israel accepted a ceasefire because of the threats of the Biden administration, namely to cut back weapons needed and, more importantly, to allow the UN Security Council to call for Israel to make an immediate ceasefire in both Gaza and Lebanon. If they didn't, they would be guilty, and as far as the world's concerned, of breaking international law. Again, the Biden administration was threatened not to not veto any resolution that said that, but to abstain, which is the same thing as accepting it. And that would put Israel in a terrible light because these things cannot be reversed. And so this is part of the many things that this administration has done to Israel's detriment. Hezbollah lost; they lost bigly. 90% of its, authority. Its leaders have been neutralized, taken out of the picture. Its weapons have been, for a large part, destroyed, particularly in southern Lebanon. Now they have no supply route, as he admitted. So they are in a really, really bad situation, which is good for Israel. All right, headline number 4. Joe Biden and company are doing as much damage to the U.S. as they can before they leave. This is so true. It's from the New York Post. Joe Biden and his Democrat apparat around him have made it plain. They're going to do as much damage to America as they can on the way out the door. Last week brought a record number of presidential pardons, including 1,500 commutations of sentences of nonviolent felons, most of whom were already serving their sentences at home after having sprung from prison during COVID. Except the White House upped the count by overlooking some truly heinous offenses. There's a number of these, actually. A Pennsylvania judge who took bribes to send kids to a for-profit detention center, an Illinois clerk who embezzled over $53 million from a town of just 15,000 people, a Massachusetts woman convicted for a fentanyl trafficking conspiracy. They're all given a pardon. All of these criminals given a pardon by Joe Biden. Now, the list is really endless. You might have seen it or seen some of the horrific pardons that have been granted. He's not done yet, by the way, either. But hopefully there will not be another administration like this in the near future. America would not be able to survive. And our next story illustrates the problem on an international scale. Headline number 5, Donald Trump slams the long-range missile strikes on Russia. This is by Tyler Durden and Zero Hedge. President-elect Donald Trump says he vehemently disagrees with the U.S. supporting long-range missile strikes inside Russian territory, which lame duck President Joe Biden authorized last month. I disagree very vehemently with sending missiles hundreds of miles into Russia. Why are we doing that? He said in an interview at Time magazine as he was named Person of the Year. We're just escalating this war and making it worse. That should not be allowed to have been done, he added. Biden took the step to support Ukrainian strikes on Russia using U.S. ATACMS and British Storm Shadow missiles, even after Moscow made it clear that it would risk a nuclear escalation. Russia responded to Ukraine's initial shooting of these two groups of rockets from both the U.S. and Britain by firing a new hypersonic intermediate-range missile known as the Orsnik. Ukrainian forces fired more into Russia this week, and the Russian defense minister has vowed there will be another response. Said this attack by Western long-range weapons won't be left unanswered, and corresponding measures will be taken, the ministry said. Trump campaigned on ending the proxy war in Ukraine, but he has not articulated how exactly he plans to do that. He was asked in the Time interview if he would abandon Ukraine, and he responded, I want to reach an agreement, and the only way you're going to reach an agreement is not to abandon. You understand what it means, right? Probably not with the reporter there, but we understand what he's saying. The president-elect stressed in the interview that he was concerned with the death toll in the conflict, saying it's much higher than what's been reported. He said the numbers of dead young soldiers lying on the fields all over the place are staggering. It's crazy what's taking place, and that's exactly correct. Crazy indeed when you have a mentally challenged man leading the U.S. in its domestic and foreign policy. Thank God we got something like 38 days to go, then it's all over. And finally, headline number 6. Now, this is a story that comes in various forms around the world. And we're going to hear more and more of this, and we need to know about it. UK government wants to ban communities from stopping wind and solar. Another Zero Hedge story. The UK government is considering curbing communities' rights to protest against wind and solar power projects, which extends to preventing these projects from being built. Let me read that again. The UK government is considering curbing communities' rights to protest wind and solar power projects, which extend to preventing these projects from being built. In other words, we don't want this in our community. It's not going to be good. It's going to cost us more money. It's not going to bring us the necessary power. The government says, we don't care. They're working on basically curbing the right to even protest this. Currently, communities can oppose projects through judicial reviews, and they can do it repeatedly. The Starmer left-wing liberal government proposal is to limit potential opponents of wind and solar installations to just one judicial review per project, a new document today has suggested. The document features plans on speeding up planning and permitting processes for large wind and solar projects and streamlining those processes to make sure there is nothing unduly slow to down the vital infrastructure development. That means the wind and solar, the Green New Deal, as it were. And so any changes that we decide to make will strike the right balance, they say, with reducing delays to infrastructure projects and maintaining access to justice in line with our domestic and international legal obligations. And here's how it is, and this is fantasy here. A new era of clean electricity for our country offers a positive vision of Britain's future with energy security, lower bills, good jobs, and climate action. This can only happen with a big, bold change, and that is why the government is embarking on the most ambitious reform to our energy system in generations. This was the Energy Minister of the UK, Ed Miliband, said in a document. Now, this woke goal is laughable. It's literally impossible to become a reality. Those who are doing this, whether on a local or national scale, are basically destroying their own countries. And we've seen this. We've talked about the impossibility of this becoming a reality, but they go ahead anyway because this is the woke view of the future. Okay, so to sum up, as we see every day, the events on the ground continue to set the stage, fulfill the biblical predictions with respect to the last days. And this last one goes in our 25 signs. We're near the end where we talk about globalism rearing its ugly head. and basically forcing the people wherever in the world to have common themes. And one of the common themes is wind and solar power now, climate change, and that's one of the big things. And so they're forcing people to do this to their own detriment. Now, not every country is doing this. There's some that are smart that won't do this, but these, particularly in the West, these so-called democracies are forcing this on the people, and it's going to make life totally, totally more miserable. Remember what we said yesterday about the new NATO leader? Well, you're going to have to, tighten your belt. Excuse me, tighten your belts here, people, and because we need more money for defense. And so you're going to have to less to spend on food, less to spend on other things, because life is going to get tougher and tougher because we got an eventual war with Russia coming. All right, so again, every day, how amazing it is. Fits perfectly the worldview of the Bible in the last days, what to expect. All right, we'll be continuing on. We'll be, like I said, recording these videos about Christmas soon. And so we trust that'll be a blessing to you. They'll be under the category, your Bible questions answered. I'm Don Stewart. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.